Good afternoon and welcome to the pre-agenda interview for Wednesday, March 4th, 2026 for ALCOSAN and Pittsburgh Water. Would the clerk please read the title of the bill?
Bill 128, Resolution appointing Shatara Murphy as a board member of the Allegheny County Sanitary Authority for a term to expire January 1, 2031. And Bill 136, Resolution appointing Scott Kunka as a member of the Board of Directors of Pittsburgh Water for a term to expire January 1, 2031.
Thank you very much. For the record, we are currently joined by Councilwoman Strasburger, Councilman Warwick. I know Councilwoman Gross is on her way and others may join us as well. If you would first introduce yourself, tell us who you are, tell us why you're willing to serve in this position, and then once you both have presented, we'll turn over to members for questions.
Okay.
Now we can.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm Shatara Murphy. I currently serve as the Assistant Vice Chancellor and Executive Lead for Community Connected Economic Strategies at the University of Pittsburgh. The focus, I won't go over my resume, I guess this isn't that type of interview, but the focus of my career has really been working in critical roles at the intersection of government, large institutions, and community, and helping to be one of the individuals that really break down systems and policies and help to drive them into outcomes that really improve the quality of life for our residents. I'm also in the process of pursuing my doctorate in business administration. Prayerfully, I will be done in April of 2027. But I believe that my background in community impact, economic stability, and economic resilience will make me a good fit for the board. That governance lens that I bring from my other board service, as well as my time in government and large institutions, will be very beneficial as well.
Thank you. My name is Scott Klunka. I live at 525 Lloyd Street in Point Breeze. I'm a constituent of Councilman Mosley. I thank you and I thank the mayor for the consideration for this position. I've lived in the city since 1974 when I came here to go to the University of Pittsburgh. I've raised 3 kids, all of whom went to the Pittsburgh public school system, and they've all graduated from this public school system. I care deeply about the city. And I did spend several decades working here with the city and with the county in various positions, and I hopefully was able to make some sort of an impact during that time. Almost 30 years with the city, 7 years with the county. And I have been retired for almost 5 years now, and I really would like to continue contributing. It's something that I missed during the retirement, and when the mayor asked me to join the board, I jumped at the chance. Just a way of background, I retired from the city as the finance and budget director in 2014, and I spent the next 7 years at the Allegheny County as the chief investment officer. And some of you may know I also spent 7 years as city council's budget director in the previous iteration. And with this appointment, I will have worked for 7 mayors during my career with the city. I also served on the PWSA board previously for 7 years, and so I'm very familiar with the operations of the authority. But it has been 12 years since I've been on the board, so there's been plenty of changes, I'm sure, and plenty of changes to the operation. So what I do pledge is to do my due diligence, to study and learn about the current situation. I think I can offer a fresh set of eyes for the board and for the authority itself. And I don't have any preconceived notions about what is going on. As I said, I would like to learn, study, and do what's best. But the one thing that I have learned during my government service is that the financial means always are less than the resources that are needed to do what's necessary for the city and for the authorities, and in particular with the PWSA, the ratepayers' ability to fund the various items that are necessary for the authority in the future. So having said that, I'm just available for questions at this point in time. Thank you.
Very much. With that, I will turn it over to Councilwoman Strasburger.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you both for your willingness to serve in your respective roles in different agencies and authorities. And I welcome both of you to the table. And again, thank you for the time that you will be putting into these endeavors. Ms. Murphy, I will start with you, and understanding that regardless of the issue area at hand, your understanding of big systems and larger entities, as well as particularly any entity that has the power to, I would imagine, much like Pittsburgh Water, whose board I serve on, ALCOSAN's meetings will be focused on the approval of contracts, procurement, and given your build, hire local experience in your current role at the University of Pittsburgh, if you could talk a little bit about what experience you think you might bring from that to an entity like ALCOSAN, who I would imagine, I don't want to speak for them, but I would imagine is constantly working to empower the newer bidders, entities, organizations that could potentially bid on a project and struggle with the ability to do so with our current sort of ecosystem that we have. What are your sort of vision? What's your vision for helping the organization as an entity not only meet its own standards and goals and meet a quota or percentage, but actually go beyond that and start to work to build up the capacity of these vendors to bid on projects that could grow in size and grow in cost to allow diverse business owners to thrive?
Great question. One thing I'm very passionate about is regional economic stability, and I sat through an ALCOSAN board meeting, did not vote, just observed, and you are correct. There are a lot of procurement contracts that come across the table, and one thing I'm really focused on is local procurement. How do we make sure that we are contracting with businesses in our region to make sure that money is staying in Allegheny County, southwestern Pennsylvania? And so also, too, awareness. And so people don't know right now what opportunities are available with ALCOSAN. And so how can I, in the seat that I would sit in on the board, make awareness around those opportunities more visible? And for those that might be struggling in capacity, infrastructure, resources, once that awareness is created, connecting local vendors with other entities around the county that can help with those capacity building needs. They are there, the resources are there, they can help them with back office infrastructure, you name it, it's there. One of the entities is the Institute for Entrepreneurial Excellence at the University of Pittsburgh. They really prepare our businesses, our regional businesses, to do business in this region. And so going at it with that lens, I just want to make sure that we are really being impactful in how we take our procurement efforts and localize them.
And aside from that, are there any lenses through which you will approach this role as a board member you think might be additive to the existing board as it stands, or different, or the same as others, but something that you're going to be sort of like, this is the lens through which I'm going to view my role and my questions and my
A lot of
efforts?
workforce and community impact. Those are two areas that I'm really focused on as well.
That's great. Mr. Konka, we had the pleasure of meeting recently, I think, in person, for the first time this last year. And that said, I had heard I can't tell you how many times I've heard your name come up from your successor, your immediate successor as the council budget director, and many of the ways that we operate in terms of our budget season has come out of the work that you've done as a council budget director. So thank you for all your years of service to the city and to various boards and authorities in the past as well. And I'm glad to see you nominated for this position. And as mentioned, as a Pittsburgh Water board member, you're going to have to, that's going to be the first thing you get used to is the name change. But as a Pittsburgh Water board member myself, look forward to having all of our seats filled, and look forward to, or was happy to see your nomination. You're right, you're correct in naming that there in the public sphere, there are never enough resources relative to the challenges out there. And I think one that we see at Pittsburgh Water is, despite significantly diversifying the funding streams, Pinvest loans, grants, EPA grants, you name it, to allow for major generational infrastructure projects, the Aspinwall pump station, the Brecken pump station, the Clearwell, like the ABC project, the major efforts to eliminate all lead lines throughout the city. There are trade-offs, right? When you focus on the above ground and underground infrastructure, what are we not able to do? What are we not able to pursue? As you have talked to current leadership there, as you have maybe witnessed board meetings, as you've talked to any board members, are there any lessons that you've learned from your past experience on the board that you think might apply to today's Pittsburgh Water, being a different entity, and if not specific to Pittsburgh Water, any kind of theories that you carry with you that you think could apply to today's Pittsburgh Water? For financial, not only financial stability, but being able to pursue kind of all that they want to pursue and make the ratepayers increasing, rates really go as far as they can. Let me just add one more thing to that idea, to continue to build the trust that is sort of still being built back on the part of the public and ratepayers.
So part of the problem has always been that the resources that are needed outweigh the funds that are available. I mean, the authority, I do know, has various programs for people who are unable to pay their bills and maybe need some help, that kind of a situation. But it seems to me that in many cases just spreads the increases over a broader area. Other people who may not have paid as much are paying more going forward. I think that from the financial standpoint, where I come from, I also have a degree in science, so I do understand the scientific aspects that are going on at the authority. That the way the authority's budget might be constructed is sort of maybe it needs to take another step, that where rather than looking at what the expenses that are necessary and trying to get the rate structure to fit into that, we need to look at more as what resources are available to the authority, and then construct the operational expense budget in that particular fashion. Again, I mean, the Clearwell project, we were talking about that 14 years ago, and they were talking about that before that kind of a situation. So I don't know enough about some of the current issues, let's say, that are going on, like the consent decree, what's necessary on the lead lines, even the PUC designation. As a sort of a civilian in the last couple of years, I've been unclear as to the pros and cons of that designation and what it does, and so that's something I'd like to look into. I don't know that I would imagine, and again, I don't know all the details for the sale of the water system from the city to the authority, whether there are any opportunities for maybe not cost savings, but for revenue enhancements that go with that. And I do know that in the past, the funds exchange between the city and the authority, at least when I was on the board, was from the authority to the city. And my understanding now that that's been changed a little bit, that the city is paying for the water, and although I did read something yesterday that maybe the city's kind of in arrears in the payments to the authority. I don't know that. That was just something that came up. So I think that, first off, the way the authority goes about constructing a budget would need to have I would need to take a look at that to see what can be done in that particular fashion. I don't know the current, status of the consent decree program and some of the other ones that are there. So, I mean, as I mentioned, I will do my due diligence and figure out exactly what the best way of going about it is. I mean, I think myself and other people that I've worked with over the years, we've been successful in being able to squeeze the resources as much as we can in order to get the most out of what we can do going forward. So the idea of I'm torn that I am trying not to have those consistent rate increases every year to the customers of the authority. I don't know. I can't say exactly what I would do at this particular point in time. I have to say that. I do know that something that came to mind before the hearing here today, or the interview, was that at the time there was about, we conservatively estimate, a 50% loss of the billable water that came out of the treatment plant. And then we had instituted a program to try to identify where that was coming at. And again, as you well know, some of the system is 100 years old, 120 years old. There's leaks everywhere, and as it is apparent, you don't know what's happening until something goes wrong, and that's when you dig into it, and that's why you have all the change orders and things like that come with the contractors. I mean, that's something that just to piggyback on your previous question, the problem of inclusion in contracting with the city, the authorities, has always been there. It's been a problem for decades, and it's particularly with the water authority, in that the contractors need to have grand scale. They need to have equipment. They need to have employees, and to do this kind of work. And so it kind of puts the small contractor out of the bidding process, because they don't have that kind of a scale. And so how do you do that? And I think in a lot of cases, the programs that are designed to try to alleviate that are going after owners of the businesses, rather than, it seems to me, who are the businesses employing? And so it's not just who ultimately is the owner of the company, but if that company is employing workers of diversity, of inclusion, and they're being paid a fair wage, that is something that is I wouldn't say just as good, but it's something that helps alleviate that problem moving forward. And maybe that's something that can be done. I mean, I was looking at the I think it was just the agenda. Maybe on last Friday you had a meeting. Maybe it was agenda before that. Independent contracting was on there, I think, and some of the other vendors. They're the same vendors, the same size, the same scope, and so it doesn't maybe we're trying to go about it in a maybe it makes sense to go about it in a different fashion. Now, I'm not sure how that can be done. I don't think there should be any problem with the authority asking who the contractors are employing. So maybe that's something as at the very least a temporary stopgap to try to address that issue moving forward. And I don't know. Again, I'll have to really analyze the budget. I haven't had a chance to do that, to see where savings can be made, where things can be done, and that's basically it at this point.
Sure. We have just lost a lot of institutional memory on our board with the retirement of Alex Shuley, who of course was, engineer at the city of Pittsburgh, ran the water department, and then, consulted with Pittsburgh Water before becoming a board member. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you're not Alex Shuley, and that's okay, but is there anything that you think you bring from your experience both at the city and board that you could apply to in terms of institutional memory? I hear what you're saying about no preconceived notions, and that there's been a 12-year gap, and that's, I think, that's sometimes helpful, but is there anything that you think you wanted to mention here?
Yes, and the main thing was from the financial standpoint was a sort of topsy-turvy way of budgeting, and that is, what are our needs, and then we'll set our rate structure in order to handle that. And I think it really, and we did that with the city for many years in the city budgets. What are the resources that you do have available to you, and how do you do the best that you can with those particular resources? The water loss problem, I'm not sure whether that's ever been addressed, or it's been addressed satisfactorily at this particular point in time. Alex was a professional engineer and had a grasp of running the authority. When I first went onto the board some years ago, it really wasn't that. It wasn't professionally run, and we were trying to get to a situation where we can make that happen. We tried to learn how to run a water authority, and that was something that we tried to do. For whatever reasons, we weren't able to continue at that particular point in time, and there was a new administration came in, and there was changes going forward. I think sometimes it might be that in my case, that I will remember what it was that was going on now that I have a chance to learn and find out what the new systems are, that maybe there's some ways to go about it. I haven't had a chance to analyze the budget that completely yet at this particular point in time. But I think that understanding that the authority and the authorities of the city are not, they're quasi-independent, they're not independent agencies, that they're part and parcel of the city government, and ultimately that they are responsive, or are and should be responsive to city council and to the mayor of the city. And that's something that I think sometimes gets lost at the authority level as to who the ultimate beneficiaries are of their services.
Thank you. I'm going to ask this question because I want to make sure to have it on the record, because it's something I care about, and I know that my colleagues will be asking about this too, maybe in more detail. But so for the record, one of the biggest threats to water authorities, potentially more so smaller authorities in more rural areas across the state, and those who are not on the financial footing that Pittsburgh Water finds itself on, the strong financial footing, I would say. That said, one of the biggest threats still remains this sort of march of privatization, acquisition, or state laws that would force acquisition or force privatization by some authorities to larger privatized. Can you clarify for us where you stand on privatizing water authorities?
I'm not for that. I don't think it's necessary, and I would be against that moving forward, for sure. I think it ought to remain in the hands of the citizens of Pittsburgh.
Okay, thank you. Those are all my questions for now, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Warwick.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, both of you, for being here. So I'll start out. Well, I'm just sort of have like some topics, and I think that they maybe apply to both in some cases and not in others. But I'll let you answer. So the first one, just overall, is stormwater management and flood mitigation, right? I live in 4 Mile Run. I represent Greenfield, Hazelwood, right? And we have in my neighborhood in particular, we've had extensive flooding issues. PWSA is currently doing some so we had a very large flood mitigation project that then was defunded after that, which would have been nice if it had happened before, but at any rate, so now PWSA is monitoring. There was an outfall rebuild in Hazelwood, or off into the Mon, that may have helped fix the problem. We don't know, but at any rate. So I wanted to ask about that, just in terms of your understanding of kind of the needs, right, that need to be met. And I know that ALCOSAN, of course, has the Clean Water Plan, which is with the tunnel system. One of those, the project is also going to be on the Mon, right, in Hazelwood. And I know that that's way down the line, 2030 or so, but comes sooner than you think. And then sort of as part of that, there's this stormwater fee, of course, that everyone's paying. And my understanding is that as part of their PWSA bill, but that stormwater fee goes in, my understanding is goes into the general fund, is not actually directed towards stormwater. So just on the overall topic, and I'll let you both speak to that. It's not really a question, but more just to hear what you have to say. Yeah.
So when it comes to major projects like that, the first question that I asked, and we will have a follow-up meeting, myself and the executive director, I wanted to know what was the community input process. If there was any feedback that was given, can I review it? What are they doing with that feedback? What leaders have they spoke to? How are we being responsible with the community voice as we prepare to take on these larger projects? And so once I get that information, I think I'll have more of an opinion on the Clean Water Project.
Okay.
My understanding is the 4 Mile Run problem predates everybody at this table at this particular point in time. My understanding is, as you mentioned, that there is no funding in it. It's in the capital budget, but it's not funded at this particular point in time to get there. So I don't know exactly what the details are behind that, why that came to be or whatever the situation is. I call it the consent decree. Well, let's go to the stormwater management fee. That was always something that we spoke about. I'm glad it was implemented. I'm not sure how it's determined at this point in time or where the money goes. That's something that I'm more than willing to look at and see as we move forward in the budget. Whether it should be used, one would think that it would be specifically, if it's specifically charged for that purpose, it would be used only for that purpose. But I don't know exactly how the budgetary system works at this particular point in time. And from the standpoint, I call it the consent decree. I think you used a different a term for it. My understanding is that ultimately the solution is to build big tunnels on both sides of the river to hold the waste product until the rivers go down and can be sent to ALCOSAN. And it seems to me that maybe there could be better, or there might be better ideas to make that work. And rather than, I think the city has just spent the last 30 years, 40 years developing on both sides of the riverfronts and everything like that, to come in and dig these gigantic holes, these gigantic tunnels. It seems to me that we should be able to come up with something a little bit better. I don't know all the details. I don't know where the progress on the plan currently is. So that's something I'll have to look at. Pardon me? I understand that they're, so.
Okay, yeah, well, so, I mean, I will definitely ask, so, I mean, as far as the 4 Mile Run project itself, right, so it was funded, then the money was moved elsewhere. Again, currently, it is, the monitoring is being done to see if the M29 outfall actually helped resolve the problem, right? We don't know that yet, but I will say there has not been a severe flood since 2021, but there also hasn't been the type of storm right above, right? That
Right.
I will say over the years, as far as the community input, it has really evolved, right? I mean, there's been lots of community input, but it's sort of evolved from back when I first moved to Pittsburgh, just kind of being like, fix it, that was the input, fix it. But now, there's actually a whole group. I'll introduce you to Annie Quinn at the Mon Water Project if you haven't met her already. Both of you, you should meet with her. She has lots of ideas around just stormwater mitigation and making our rivers cleaner and all that good stuff. So I'm happy to make that connection. One project that I wanted to just highlight for both of you, and also, as far as the ALCOSAN project, I recognize this is 2030, this is down the road, but definitely to have the community engaged in how that's progressing would be a good thing, just to kind of, I don't think that, to be honest, I don't think that folks are really keyed into that at all. It's sort of, maybe they've heard of it, but they don't know, so as that moves forward. I'd like to ask about Panther Hollow Lake. So there is a lake in Shenley Park, it's Panther Hollow Lake. It is, back in the day, everyone had, sort of old school Pittsburgh has very fond memories of the boathouse and all this cool stuff that was down there. It's like a nice asset in Shenley Park. But it also was part of this original stormwater mitigation plan, which, by the way, my understanding is that plan is, the design for the plan is like 90% done. It just didn't get, the funding just went away. And I know that Alex Shuley had said that it is perhaps the plan was more complicated and more expensive than the result. That as bang for your buck was sort of the concern there. But at any rate, Panther Hollow Lake feels to me like a project that in addition to, if we fix the lake, whatever needs to happen, I mean, and it might be complicated, right? But fixing the lake could both improve the stormwater issues and also bring back an asset to the city. But it will take a lot of collaboration, right, between PWSA and the city. So and with our state partners in terms of funding and all of that. But there is lots of movement around that project right now. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, but I just wanted you both to be aware of it.
I don't know the current state of that situation, so I'd have
Yeah.
to study it. Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, right now the dam is blocked and it's, the fish all die. I mean, it's, and when it rains heavily, the lake overflows and
Right.
it's a bit of a mess. So,
But clearly, any water that is stopped before it gets
Yeah.
the run is going to be better for the community.
Right.
And even the outfalls, my recollection of the problem was you can have the outfall that sends the water to the river, but if the river's high, then basic physics says the water can't come back out. So I don't know
Yeah.
that there's been any further progress on engineering solutions in that fashion. So I don't
Yeah.
know what the current state of those projects are at this point in time.
yeah. I mean, the outfall, again, I'm not obviously an engineer, but in that repair was also something to keep the river water from going backwards into the system when the river.
Right,
gets
but
high. Right.
then you would block
Right.
the river water, then it blocks
Yeah.
the other water
Yeah.
coming back from
Yeah.
the run itself. So,
Yeah. So at any rate,
I mean, the city's built in hills and valleys, so
Yeah.
that's always going to be a problem.
Yeah.
And I actually watched the hearing here yesterday, or the interviews yesterday, and it was mentioned several times, and it's always been the city's built for 600,000 people. The infrastructure of the city is built for 600,000 people, but there's only 300,000 people they're paying the bills, and so that obviously is a disconnect right there to go there.
Yeah, yeah. But at any rate, though, Panther Hollow Lake has been, at least the community, also sort of the water experts around kind of see that as like low-hanging fruit, something that could be fixed, beautified. I mean, but again, in partnership with Parks Conservancy and the city and everybody, if everybody could kind of come together, including our state partners for funding, that could be a beginning to the solution, at least. Okay, I also have, so one thing, and I think this actually applies both to ALCOSAN and PWSA, since the bills come together, correct? I think both the bills come through via PWSA, but it's
That's correct.
both bills on the same bill. So this is something I've said a few different times, and I'll let you respond. But again, as board members, it's something I think that you may have, that you certainly would have some control over. So right now, we are seeing folks who are getting evicted for not paying their water bill. And the reason for that is that unlike the electric bill or even the gas bill, the water bill is attached to the property. So if the tenant isn't paying the bill, the landlord is getting and getting notices and the bill's going up and up and up. And so it becomes a dispute between the landlord and the tenant about paying the water bill. And, we're putting so much money and effort into making sure that people can stay in their homes and fighting, eviction prevention and all of this stuff. And the other aspect of that is that, or sort of the other result of that, is that because of this issue of the water bill, oftentimes the landlord is just saying, I'll pay the water bill, you don't pay the water bill. I don't want to deal with a tenant who isn't paying their water bill, and I don't want to deal with PWSA and an unpaid water bill. So the landlord is just saying, I'll just pay the bill, it'll be in my name, and then they're of course passing the cost on in terms of rent, but then the tenant is not getting the rebate, or lower income tenants are not getting the rebate. Yeah, they're not getting they can, but the landlord has to sign up, and it just doesn't happen much of the time. So I wanted to just sort of present that dilemma to you, if you have any thoughts, but, as board members.
I just feel like it's another system that has been designed to set people up for failure, and how do we go about making that change? And so is there a way that we can utilize the income of the tenant of the house, for a different application? And maybe if the water bill has to stay in the landlord's name, but they can prove that this is a rental property, how do we then show that the tenant who lives there is low income and does actually qualify for these programs? They are there. The programs are designed to support the people, but the barriers are in place to prevent individuals from actually taking advantage of programs that were designed for them.
I mean, I think sometimes it's that the landlord calls and says this is and then the PWSA says, well, your tenant should sign up for this thing, but much of the time, especially is that the tenant and the landlord this is not like always a friendly relationship, right? The landlord's just like, you know what, I just want to get this water bill paid. Like, what do I have to do?
Yeah.
And oftentimes the response from PWSA is, you have to file for eviction, in which case everybody goes down to the magistrate. And that just isn't,
Yeah, and you have to actually show the bills for some of these programs. And if the bill's not in your name, if it's in your landlord's name, again, it's another barrier. So again, it's just system design, and we have to advocate for redesigning the system.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. I just wanted to bring that up because when we talk it's something I bring up over and over. It does feel like something that should be adjusted, right? If the other utility, it just feels like the bill, and I understand, like, that is PWSA's kind of, it's the lien on the property. That's the ultimate, that's like the end, the end is having that lien on the property. But it would be curious to even analyze, like, what are those property what does that bring to PWSA versus just having a bill that goes with the tenant? And then, if the tenant moves, saying, okay, well, if you want to turn your water on, then you have to connect with PWSA and figure out a payment plan for this bill. And, anyway.
It'll be a good research project.
Yeah, thanks. And the last question I have is because there was an article in this past December in Public Source. This was around PWSA, and I don't know actually the process at ALCOSAN, but it was around transparency in the budget process. So there were concerns, of course, at the city. Well, we have city council, so there's like a preliminary budget, and then everybody talks about the budget, and it's out there, and people give comment, and like all of this, you know what I mean? And then the final budget, so is passed by but also would be the board in this situation. So if you haven't read the article, I recommend it, but I just wanted to know if you had any thoughts about ways that we could increase transparency, because with rates going up, you know what I mean? People want to, as rates go up, they really do, whether they look at it or not, it's just knowing that it's there and to be able to say, we all get to give input into this budget.
Well, I think that the budgeting process will be as transparent as the board members want it to be. And if the board members aren't asking for the details that are necessary to understand that budget, then they need to do that. And that would be my idea on the board. And I'm not sure exactly how the budgeting process has worked in the last few years, whether it's done through subcommittees or things like that. But the board's small enough, just like city council, that everyone can be involved, I believe, in those budget processes. And I think it's best for everyone not to have sort of a sub area of expertise, because one will need to understand not just the finances, but the engineering, but the customer service, but the billing. Everything needs to go into that particular pot. So I have not read that article, but as I said, I think the transparency can be as transparent as the board members want, which is something that I would be advocating for.
Yeah, I think that was the gist of the article, was that at the board meetings, which are of course public, right? The discussions had clearly already happened, right? Before, and so that it was just here's the budget, and without, and really to go back to the formal, that money being moved, it was a done deal before anybody had a chance to comment on it, you know, from the public, even for myself. But yeah, so I definitely recommend taking a look at that article, just especially with the rates going, you know, as rates go up. The public should have a chance to at least see what's being proposed and understand the conversations rather than just like, you know, a yes vote. I mean, to the extent they want to, but, you know.
Right.
I think that's it for me. I don't know if I'll think of anything else, but I'm glad to have you both. Or, you know, sorry, we just met, but I know we know each other well from, you know, working in Hazelwood and obviously constituent. Are you still constituent?
Yeah, still constituent.
That's what I thought. Okay. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Councilwoman Gross.
Hi, thank you both for being here. I'm glad we talked a little bit about stormwater. I'm glad we talked a little bit about privatization. I'm glad we talked a little bit about kind of like what are the remaining infrastructure challenges and the complicated kind of relationship between both City Council and PWSA and ALCOSAN and the consent decree and what to do about these issues. When I first took office, it was actually in December of 2013. So I was here with Councilman Bill Peduto sitting right next to me for 1 month. Well, it was still the last month of the Ravensdale administration. And then I was appointed to the PWSA board. I think my first board meeting was maybe April or May of 2014. So there had been no board for a few months. I think they had asked all of the previous board members to step down, and they did. And then there were no board meetings for several months. And then we kind of got to our first board meeting as all new board members, Paul Legger, and myself and others. And Veolia, I think the executive director was a direct employee of Veolia. The chief engineering officer was a direct employee of Veolia. The chief operating officer was a direct employee of Veolia. It was like the top 5 people of the org chart, the entire org, top of the org chart, because we were still under that Ravensdale lease. Or Ravensdale era lease, where Mr. Kunka, you were on the board that signed that lease.
Yes, I mean, it wasn't a lease. It was a firm, a management firm to help us.
It's technically an operate and maintain lease, where you are asking a private corporation to run your system, to run the organization.
That was not the intention at the time.
That was the result.
Well, the intention at the time was, as I was alluding to it earlier, was that there was a lack of management capability at the authority with the employees that were there.
Well, I'm talking about 2014.
So
later,
what the idea was that
it's not really actually the question.
Okay.
So the question is, when we have privatization of operations, right, the result from that lease was that we had crumbling infrastructure because they did not invest in the infrastructure. The board and the authority during the Veolia operate and maintain lease did not invest in infrastructure, did have a kind of incentives structure in that contract, where if they had money savings, then they got to take like 20% of the money savings, right? So if they save $1 million off the operating costs, they get $200,000 of it.
it wasn't just savings, it was productivity improvements and
KPIs.
operational improvements.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely was.
Right.
And so what they did was like fire the water quality department. So that was a cost savings that they claimed profit from. Basically, it was a giant mess. We all spent, as a board, several years cleaning it up. So there was, crumbling infrastructure. There was an entire mess of an implementation of smart metering that ended up with thousands of inaccurate bills across the system. Thousands. I was getting hundreds of them from my own council district, where people were getting charged, in the thousands, right? So there were thousands of constituents getting bills in the thousands. And they were inaccurate because it was literally just gobbledygook data being sent. And the reading of the data from the water bills, we've had entire post agendas on it. You feel free to watch them. Were, not translating into the accounting and billing system. And so then there was, as we roll into kind of 2016, we had the Flint water crisis, where we learned that people in Flint, Michigan were being poisoned by their water quality. Veolia was in control of that water system. The state of Michigan had put Veolia in charge of that water authority. And they had switched the water source, created alkalinity throughout the system, which leached the lead out of the water pipes and caused, outrageously high parts per billion lead. And we were only about 10 months behind them because Veolia had similarly bought inferior materials, weren't testing the pH of the water in our system accurately, and we lived through that same crisis and had to clean that up. And so we sued Veolia and got rid of them. So I'm wondering what do you think is the lesson?
The idea behind the contract with the Veolia was that we did not have the expertise to run a water system. And that was the problem with the crumbling infrastructure and the behind the times sort of operation. The original contract with Veolia was for them to teach us how to run a water authority, how to run a water system, and to bring in subject matter experts that the PWSA did not have at that particular point in time. And there was a problem with the director of the PWSA that he needed to resign, and there wasn't any succession plan that was in place from the previous administration. So the idea was to bring in a company, and there was a robust RFP process. All the members of the board, including I think your predecessor, Councilman Dowd, at the time, who was not Councilman Dowd was a man who was not shy about his opinions, and we all came to an agreement that we did not have the proper personnel to run the authority, and we wanted to be taught how to do that. And the contract itself, if you go back to the original contracts, was for them to produce operating manuals for each section of the authority, whether that was the billing, whether that was customer service, whether it was the engineering, for us to have as templates for city authority employees to run the system after they left. There was a temporary contract that was supposed to be there at the particular point in time. When the new administration came in, the Veolia was that's when they became the operators of the system. When the executive director, he was an employee of the authority, but he was made the director of the PWSA. I'm not sure by whom. That was after I left the board. And that's where I believe a lot of the problems came to fore at that particular point in time. So just stepping back, the idea of the company was to try to get subject matter experts to teach us how to run the operation, because in the past the PWSA had some directors that were not did not have the experience or weren't particularly qualified in that particular area.
And so what is the lesson that was learned?
The lesson was that when you have a change in administrations and there's a fundamental change in what the outcome of the contract was supposed to be, then that's where you have a problem. There wasn't a chance to finish what the original idea was, and that was to produce operating manuals for all of the authority's functions. It was too big, too wide, too...
I don't remember ever seeing any manuals.
No, that's correct. The contract was never finished. That's right.
Let me try another scenario.
Okay.
When you served on the Parking Authority Board as, I believe, chairperson,
That's correct.
did you not put forward the plan to privatize the city's parking assets?
No, it was a lease of the parking assets.
Okay, so that wasn't another operate and maintain lease?
No, that was, and if you dive a little bit further, there was a unfunded mandate from the state that the city's pension funds needed to be.
We all know about that. And
Well,
how it plugged it,
so
but
the city was put in an untenable.
The city council did not approve the plan that you put forward.
That's correct.
And can you tell, that plan was with Morgan Stanley?
Well, they were the investment advisor. They did not participate in
With
the actual.
LAX maybe was the operator who was going to operate it?
Laz was actually
LAZ.
the parking operator.
Okay, the parking operator.
Right.
Now, that deal was structured, the one that City Council of Pittsburgh did not approve, was approved in Chicago.
Not that deal, a
2008.
different deal.
So it's about $75,000 for, was this, to lease 36,000 in Chicago to lease the parking meters to the same consortium.
No, it wasn't.
believe.
No, that's not
Well,
correct.
it's Morgan Stanley, I believe. And for 75 years. Do you remember how long the lease would have been in Pittsburgh?
50.
So 50 years. This is 20 years later practically. And, just the random internet considers it one of the worst privatization deals in U.S. history. So, my colleagues on council
Chicago deal.
have always been proud of themselves that they fought off that proposal from you.
Well, let's talk about the Pittsburgh proposal. The Pittsburgh proposal was completely different than the Chicago proposal. We learned everything that we could to what went wrong in the Chicago proposal, and incorporated that into the deal here in the city. What would have occurred had that particular deal went through? Right now, there'd be 4 new parking garages that the parking authority owns.
It would also be empty like the other ones right now because there's no downtown offices.
Right. I mean, I don't think anyone could have foreseen the pandemic at that particular point in time.
Well, it's fortunate the city council did. So, or avoid that deal at least. Okay, so there would have been 4 parking garages.
But,
You said was the Pittsburgh deal?
yeah, I'm not. The reason that idea was formulated was because there was an unfunded mandate from the state in order to increase, that really made no sense, but to get the pension fund above 50%, I think it was 50% at the particular time, I don't remember. And so the city as a whole was scrambling as to what ways that could be done. It was actually thought at the time that it was necessary for the pension funds to be kept within the city itself. In hindsight, it might have been better to let the state take over the pension funds at that particular point in time. But that's not what happened. So what we were looking for were ways in order to meet that state mandate. And one of the ways of doing that was the only way that we could do that within that 2-year time frame, we needed a chunk of cash up front. And the only way to do that at that particular point in time it came out was we needed someone to give us the money in advance, and then they would recoup their money just like private businesses do over the course of the lease of the system itself. And we felt
And
that
so
that
you would
was,
have taken the money, and then what would have you given them?
the money would have went into the pension fund, which is what was necessary to do that.
What would LAZ and Morgan Stanley be getting?
They would have got a portion of the parking taxes and the parking rates, not the parking taxes, I'm sorry, the parking rates that people pay for the next 50 years. Whereas the parking taxes would still come to the city of Pittsburgh. The other portion of the rates that people were paying would come to the city of Pittsburgh. And the city would basically be reaping the same revenue that it does now.
So one of the problems with the Chicago one was that the city had signed away control of its curb, basically.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
And so, well, yeah, because you didn't do the deal at all.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying.
Is there a copy of the proposal that you had for the record?
Yeah, I'm sure there is. There was 2 lease agreements. They were about 400 pages each. One was for the parking garages, and one was for the meters that were there. And so those those lease terms were studied as to what went wrong in the city of Chicago, and those same kinds of things were not in those lease proposals. All of the ideas that were there, that no parking on Sunday, in order for them to make it, that there's not parking on Sundays throughout the city, that when various community groups wants to have their festivals, that they would be able to close the streets down without incurring any financial penalties. So all those items and many more were taken care of inside those leases. And we did learn, we had top people on it, and that was a situation. Again, all of this was something that was forced upon the city because of the theoretically the pension fund problem, whereas I don't know where the pension fund stands at this particular point in time, because it was I think it was called the parking asset. So right now the parking rates have gone up. They've gone up dramatically, and the revenue is coming back to the city for the, I think it's 15 million, maybe 17 million at this point in time, going into the pension fund. Mm-hmm. So that was the genesis of the program and the rationale behind it.
Right. Again, it would be great if you could, if we knew where to find those proposals.
I mean, I don't have them.
I don't know if they're on the legislative record.
Well, they're part of the
controllers.
city's records. I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, where they're currently at, I couldn't tell you. I mean, I don't have them.
Right.
They're city property. So I'm
That would be
assuming
interesting to see, because it sounds to me like you're still enthusiastic about these kinds of privatization schemes.
No, not at all. What I'm saying is we were faced with a situation that we needed to come up with several $100 million in 2 years, and we tried to come up with the best thing that we could do. It wasn't a sale of the parking system, it was a lease of the parking system. All of the revenue that the city would have gotten would still have come, except we would have got a lump sum. The lump sum would have then, that portion of the amortization that the companies that gave us the money, I mean, there was talk at the time about, well, the private sector is interested in making a profit. Well, of course they are. And so the idea was that we needed money up front, and then they would make their profit over the course of a 50-year period. And again, it wasn't something that just came out of the blue, that it was an idea, let's do this. It was something that needed to be done in order to meet the unfunded mandate from the state. And we still never really figured out why that was important to the state.
Right.
To the
Again,
state
so I think
legislature.
the Chicago version has been widely studied, and again, it's reported as just kind of like a lesson in like worst practices.
It was, and that's why we didn't follow it.
Everything
That's right.
is
You're
terrible.
exactly right. Yes, Councilwoman.
But I heard Councilwoman Strasburger kind of ask in a broad way, right, are you in favor of privatization? And you said no.
That's right.
But when I called the Veolia lease like privatization of operations, it seems like you objected. Do you not see it that way?
No, I do not. No. The board hired Veolia to teach the authority how to run a water system. That was the idea behind it.
Do you
Simple
consider
as
that the parking plan that you had a privatization of operations?
No, that was a plan in order to get a lump sum of money that was required by the state that the city did not have in order to maintain the operation of the city's pension funds. So it's not something, it wasn't organic that let's try to find a way to make some money or to make a big pile of money. The idea was, here's a mandate from the state. Does the city want to maintain control of its pension funds, which the leadership, the elected leadership at the time decided, yes, that's in fact what we want to do. So they charged me and other people to work together. How can we avoid that?
Sure, that was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been now, I think, a lot of lessons learned from a lot of cities over a lot of decades, looking at these kinds of contracts. I would call, they were both leases, in my opinion. And we've had a post agenda here at this table that was chaired by Councilwoman Strasburger on kind of lessons about privatization that's already, I feel like it could be even updated because it's been a while. And the thing that was the mnemonic that I recall is DBFOM. So there are various kinds of ways that you can contract as a government with a private corporation. You mentioned enterprise or independent, what are they called again? Independent contractors, the ones who do a lot of our excavation work and things like that. So, design, build, finance, and then operate and maintain. And as you get down that list, the closer you get to operate and maintain, you've basically de facto privatized operations because you don't have any of your own employees running the system, or at least, in our cases, in the leadership with the Veolia contract. It's a little distressing that you kind of don't think of these contracts as privatization, and also that you don't think they're problematic, because I do.
I don't think I said either of that. They're not problematic. The parking lease situation was because of an unfunded mandate from the state. It wasn't something that organically came up that, well, this is a better way to go about business. The water authority, as we found it at that particular point in time, had no expertise in running a water authority. And we did the best. We did our brainstorming to try to, what's the best way to teach us, the city, the authority, the citizens of Pittsburgh, how do we run a water authority properly? And so we took, at that particular point in time, and there was and I'm sure those are available too, there was a robust RFP process. I think there were 7 firms that bid on the proposal. All of that was done. There was the board of directors and city council there was a wide range of opinions and ideas as to what's necessary, and everybody came to the consensus that the Veolia at that particular point in time was the best to teach us and had the expertise to teach us how to run a water authority. And they were working hand in hand with the authority's own employees. After the Ravenstall administration left, I resigned from the board and the others. I'm not sure what happened, but Veolia was not running the authority at that particular point in time. We had expertise from them to do that. The executive director, we in fact had 2 executive directors. They were co-executive directors, were authority employees at that particular point in time. One had expertise in engineering, and the other one had expertise in finance, which we thought at that time made some sense. Because, as was mentioned earlier, the authority does have, there's a gigantic engineering and operational component, and there's also a administrative component and finance components that goes with it.
Right. Another thing we did early on was break up the Chester no-bid contract that had been not bid for 20 years.
I don't recall that.
Chester Engineering.
Yeah, I know who Chester Engineering is.
Do you remember
right.
that they were running the entire program? The engineering program?
Well, they were the authority's engineer. The authority, I'm sure, has an engineering firm now.
No.
They don't?
No, it's broken up into many contracts. Yeah.
Well,
Because
but
that
they're
was
still
another
private
lesson learned.
engineering companies, right?
Yes, but they are competitively bid and scoped out at a much smaller scale. Because again, that contract hadn't been bid out for 20 years, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't think that's the case.
We can fact check that as well.
Yes.
Well, I haven't asked any ALCOSAN questions, but since Mr. Kunka brought up the kind of concept, I think you were proposing, Mr. Kunka, that pipes be built in the rivers to catch the outfalls. You were saying when we were talking about 4 Mile Run?
No, that particular one was the outfall was going into the river, but if the river's higher than the outfall, then you can't, then the water that's coming down through Panther Hollow and through 4 Mile Run can't get into the river. So Councilwoman Warwick mentioned there could be some, I don't know if there's like gates or whatever that can stop it from doing it. I don't know what the engineering solution to that is.
So, Ms. Murphy, are you familiar with the Big Dig program at ALCOSAN?
I am vaguely familiar, but that's actually a part of my orientation. I will be learning more about that project if I am elected on the board.
So that there's already been, I think it's a $3 billion or $4 billion project that we will all be paying for on our water and sewer bills, right, on the portion that goes to ALCOSAN. And I believe a lot of the drop shafts have begun.
And I had a lot of
Being
questions.
drilled.
How did we get there?
Oh, it's a long and sordid story.
That's
Yes,
what
it
I was
is.
told.
Yes, it is. In the portion that I know, and it went on for years before me, that's for sure. Yeah, no, it was ordered by the EPA. So again, so in the way I've been briefed on it over the years, that we had resisted settling, or we'd been not had a kind of open consent decree that was being negotiated for like 20 years. As they were trying to force us to double the size of the ALCOSAN plant and do what was like a gray plan. Well, the first Trump administration just gave the order. So that's been a while also now. And I believe some of the first drop shafts are already under construction at the head of the Ohio. Does anybody, nobody's here that represents that river bank. So I know the ones for the Allegheny River are projected to start in a couple of years. And it's a little insane. You know, it's the tunnel boring machine. We'll be drilling 150 feet straight down. Yeah. And we'll leave behind a manhole cover 30 feet in diameter. Not even diameter, in diameter. Right? I don't know. How big is that from here to the wall? And so I, and it takes a long time for them to be drilling down. And yes, it will be right by people's homes.
Yeah.
And yes, it will be right by all of the new construction on the Allegheny River and in Lawrenceville and in the Strip District. At least, those are the ones I'm more familiar with, and along each of the rivers. And then, so all of that outfall, instead of falling, fall down like a giant manhole, right? And so then we'll transfer, and they're going to put giant pipes under each river to convey all of that. So 150 feet under each river will be a giant tunnel. So that's what's happening. And it'd be great for someone to figure out how that we do something else to divert our water and sewer overflow. Because that's going to cost a lot of people on their bills. Right? It's no one else is paying for that. It's the people in the ALCOSAN system that are paying for that, straight out of our wallets, straight out of our monthly bills. So, do you have any experience with infrastructure?
Not to that degree, but I always, I say this all the time, affordability is a responsibility. And so you are right, this is going to be passed on to the residents. And so, these plans are already in action. And so what do we do at this point to mitigate any further harm that our residents would endure from these decisions that were made?
Yeah, well, so for example, at PWSA, when we did raise rates by a lot, and the PWSA has continued to raise them, or the PUC now has the authority to raise them. And so I did help start the customer assistance program. We had never had one. So there is some needs-based relief that can be applied for. And ALCOSAN has had one for a while, but as we were hearing from Councilwoman Warwick, they're not perfect. And so it would be nice to problem solve how to, a lot of times the answers, it was years ago now, we're like, well, we don't know how to do that with our software, right? It's the parcel number, and so we just have the property owner, and we can't figure out how to get the tenant on there or something silly, right? And it may take time, and it does take staffing and investment of resources, but
We have to keep thinking about
people do
these
fancier things
yeah.
than that, right? I mean, that's like some, that's something that we should be able to work at and figure out.
I agree.
Yeah, so I appreciate that. We also have gone back and forth with ALCOSAN over the years about the, in this giant multi-billion-dollar plan, that we, again, will be paying for. No one else is paying for it. How to also leave behind community improvements, right? So if you've got, I feel like there are 10 or something drilling sites along the Allegheny River. Once the drill and the trucks and all of their truckloads of rocks leave after nearly a year, then what? That's public space now, even if it was private space before ALCOSAN got there, which is also going to happen. And so how is it maintained? What does it look like? We've had many, many year visions. Some of them started under the Ravensville administration of Riverfront Park. There was a Tiger grant, a federal grant of $2 million that started the Allegheny River Boulevard vision. There's been progress made, right? So we have both traffic calming on some of the streets parallel to the river, but there's many sections of river trail that are in place. Not completely, there's gaps that we need to work to fill, but we would love support from ALCOSAN to prioritize that and the green investments that go with them. Clearly, again, the EPA ordered us to do not a green infrastructure plan. And the current EPA is basically the same one as the one that ordered us. So, but to the extent that we can find ways to invest in the things that improve assets for the citizens, I would love your partnership to do that, because It's very sensitive. Again, the constituents in my district have been organizing around these concepts well before I got elected, and I've been here 12 years. So they're really, put a lot of time, energy, and effort in their own to these beautification and these recreational visions. And it's a great vision to be able to go from like the city line, city border, and now beyond it, because they're going to bring the brilliant line railroad trestle the county has bought, so you can go far upriver up in Allegheny County on the northern side of the Allegheny River, and then you'll be able to come across on those riverfront trails that around Aspinwall over a railroad trestle, rail to trail bridge, and so to be able to get into place, we don't have it. River trail that could get you, if you can get all the way to the point, then you can get all the way to Washington, D.C. off trail. Because right now already, if you get on your bicycle at the point, you can get to Washington, D.C. not on road, which is really cool. So to be able to extend that northward.
A program around that. They do a biking program from the city to D.C. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wonderful. I'm glad to hear that. So yeah, the people in my district are really wanting to see kind of more movement. Again, we've had some, we changed zoning, so now that there are setbacks and new construction and there are public easements. Even in the Strip District, even in the Buncher property, there's public easements now. So there's river trail there, which was it took 10 years to negotiate. But we still have gaps to fill in and infrastructure to build, and then figure out who's maintaining that, and how we can add more park basically to the city. So I'd look forward to your partnership there. Mr. Kuka, I'm not sure we agree on things. I'm not going to take any more time in this hearing, but I may need to, maybe we should talk further.
Sure, absolutely.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Don't really have many questions regarding the ALCOSAN, because you sort of answered the question when you answered Councilwoman Strasburger's first question for you. But just to piggyback on what the Councilwoman was saying, I think the Ohio River Tunnel is currently under construction. The whole project is like $2 billion. I think that okay. I think the Allegheny is underway. So my real interest is seeing, of all this work that's going to be spent in the water treatment facilities being expanded to take in all the water, how do we break apart those contracts and get more local contracts as a part of this system? But that's more of a comment than a question.
We need to do that across the board. I meant debundling of contracts. I don't know, my work in procurement only spans for about 10 years, but there are so many opportunities where we can debundle these contracts, get more vendors per contract. We'd actually get things done a lot faster by debundling some of these contracts. So that is something that I'm interested in. And it gives minority businesses an opportunity to bid on these contracts.
Absolutely. Mr. Konka?
Yes.
not really a question, but a thought, an idea, and I'm just curious of your thought. All across the city, when I drive, most recently on Wilkins Avenue, when I turned on the Wilkins the other day, at some point, my car is sort of like this, because in the middle of the road has been dug up, has been fixed, but not to the specifications of the city. Therefore, it shrinks, and cars are swerving, or you're driving somewhat erratically. I don't know this for a fact, but this is my assumption, that the utilities, and I'm picking on all utilities at this point, but PWSA also, when you all dig up and have to repair, my assumption is it probably costs you more to repave a road than it would the city. And so my idea would be, and we could create a pilot, would the authority be willing to say, here, that's not really what we do, right? We're good at digging up, and we're good at replacing pipes. We're clearly not good at finish off the pavement and the infrastructure portion of it. And I'm making this up, here we spend $1 million buying the paving equipment, performing that work. I would argue the city could probably do the same for about $500,000. We'll give you that money, and you can just build it into your paving system. What would your thought be about something like that?
And I think that's a good idea. Just from my own, I live in that area. Wilkins, I think, was People's Gas.
Oh, okay.
But PWSA does it also, or Pittsburgh Water
Yeah,
does
the point
it
is,
also, and everybody does.
you
yes.
drive and you know a utility has been
That's
here.
correct. And they will tell you that they can't redo the road in the wintertime because the asphalt plants are not open, so that's why they're just the temporary pavement, that whole kind of a situation. This has been a problem since I started with the city years and years ago. It's a Reynolds Street in the same area with a little business district, tree-lined streets and everything like that. I think it was like late August. City came in, the contractor, but it was the city who did it. Beautiful job. Tore it down, put it up, put all the bike lanes on it, put all the markings or whatever. I went to visit my daughter who lives in San Francisco for about a week. I came back, People's Gas was there, completely ripped up. It was all completely ripped up. And so that coordination, there's supposed to be coordination, and it clearly hasn't happened through all this particular point in time. I don't know whether the Pittsburgh Water has a better or less better contract than the city does to do these repavings, but having one set of people doing it, I think, makes a lot of sense, for sure. I don't know what the current state is as to how, I think that, at least my previous understanding, that like someone like People's Gas, they don't even have to do the whole road. They only have to do half of the road, and that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense when you do that. So having one contractor do it for the city, I think, makes a lot of sense. It's something that should be looked at, for sure.
Okay.
But it has been the problem of
lack of
the city doing
coordination.
something and then the utilities coming in afterwards. There's supposed to be coordination there. I'm not sure. I guess it hasn't been resolved at this point.
It has not been resolved. This is something that comes up almost every single year, especially around budget season. But nonetheless, this is something that came up like a week ago, and I was talking with one of the contractors who does work for the city, and just trying to get a sense of how they deal with it. And as we were just talking it through, that's where this idea of, well, wait a minute. And he suggested, again, that the utilities pay more in expenses to do the same work. And I was like, well, if that's the case, then give us the dollars. Let us.
True, right.
And then we can even expand our footprint of the amount of roads that we're actually paving. So anyway, just a thought.
Yeah.
Would love to be able to work with you on
Absolutely.
that. If there are no further questions, I believe we've exhausted the business of this meeting, and we are adjourned.